This is the time I saw a gigantic man in the woods. It was sometime in 1976 or so during the week of Thanksgiving holiday. Me and my dad and his friend Leo were deer hunting. I would have been about 12 or 13 years old at the time. We're in a very remote area of Osage County in Oklahoma, north of Pawhuska, the Oklahoma town my dad was from. We were camping in an overhead camper and we were set up near Rock Creek, way back off the highway on private land. This particular morning, I decided to not go out for reasons I don't remember. After Dad and Leo left in the early darkness, I crawled up in the overhead bunk because it was warmer up there. As I was dozing off shortly after sunup, I began to hear footsteps faintly off in the trees. The leaves were all on the ground this time of year, and I could make out the crunch, crunch, crunch of someone walking. It kept getting louder and closer. The steps were very rhythmic, like a person walking. Not a step or two, then a step or two like an animal would make, so I assumed it was Dad or Leo coming back to camp. I figured they had a deer down and were coming to put me to work, so I began to get around. As I was about to climb down out of the bunk, the footsteps were very loud and then went silent, which meant they had stepped out of the forest and onto the rock shelf we had set up where we had set up camp. I leaned around to the window and looked out to see who it was, and I nearly crapped my fruit of the looms. About 60 feet away from the camper, walking past the camp at an angle between the camp and the creek, was this huge man that looked to be dressed in all dark clothes. He was making steady strides down towards the creek and seemed indifferent to the camp. I watched this man as he covered a huge amount of distance in a very short time. Before I knew it, he was completely out of sight. Once he hit the forest on the other side of the creek, I could once again hear the steady rhythm of leaves crunching under his steps. They slowly got quieter and quieter until I could no longer hear them. Now the direction he was going was deeper into the blackjack forest, as the only road in and out for miles was the one right beside our camp. I was frozen in fear and disbelief for a few minutes, but I was finally able to get around and get moving. As I mulled this over in my mind, I tried to convince myself that it was Leo because Leo's cold weather gear was a black snowmobile suit. I couldn't explain to myself why the man was not wearing orange during deer rifle season, as I know neither my dad nor Leo would do something that stupid. I finally worked up the guts to go outside the camper and stoke the fire. Later, when my dad and Leo came in for breakfast, I casually inquired as to whether they had been walking around at all. They both replied no, that they had gone up to their stands and stayed there until returning to the camp.